Hi, good morning. Today's video is a bit inspired by a debate I currently have with a so-called skeptic. Yeah. No, I'm not gonna go into the uh, argument about whether or not nature therapies works, or whatever or not there's something supernatural, because I've gone into that a lot of detail in other times, and I probably will again. But this video is about the concept that both sides of the argument seem to have, that you have to have either a faith in the supernatural, or you have to have appreciation of science. Like this guy constantly said that I was against science, I hated science. And quite frankly, that reminds me more of Christians. Not all Christians, of course, but some Christians who seem to think that if you do not identify as Christian yourself, then you hate Christianity. And I think that that kind of either-or rhetoric is stupid. Basically, I think science is great. Science has given medicines which are extremely effective. Science has made sure that I have this computer which I now use to talk to you. Science has done such amazing things, and basically all from the invention of the wheel. That was science. Science has furthered human development and is incredibly important. What I do not think, however, is that the current scientific paradigm have all the answers. And I don't think that we should just dismiss everything that can't be proven by the current scientific paradigm. So, yeah, I think that you have to have both sides. And besides, science isn't a thing, science is a method. So that even occultists use science, they're just not part of the current scientific paradigm. Because many people are confused on the difference between science, the method, and science, the community. Scientific method is just a way to gather information, and it is useful for all sorts of things, and it is a very reliable and well developed way to observe our surroundings. However, the scientific community, that is a group of people, if you will. It's a paradigm, it's an assumption of what is right or wrong, which does have political power, in which egos play a big part, and so on. Science itself is completely without opinion because it's just a method. However, a given scientist will very often not be very keen on having his or her theories disproven. Also, as we develop more and more technology, our ability to observe the world around us improves, meaning that while science there's a lot of things that, for example, in the 1800s science could not discover. For example, I don't remember if it was the 18th or the 1700s, but anyway, there was this doctor, and he discovered that if he washed his hands after he had dissected corpses before he went to the delivery room to help pregnant women give birth, the amount of women who got infections and died in the hospital ward decreased drastically. Now, he was laughed out of the community. They destroyed his career because science at that point couldn't prove, it couldn't measure his claims. They could definitely see that this doctor had a much lower mortality rate than other doctors, but since they couldn't measure and weigh what he said there were probably some microorganisms, but at that point microorganisms wasn't a proven fact, so he was ignored. And I think it's much the same way with the supernatural, the occult, nature therapy, religion, and so on. That I think that a lot of these things is definitely natural. They are in the world, so they're definitely natural. But I don't think science at the moment is very well equipped at measuring them. And I also think that for me and for many others who believe these things, we don't think it's right to just sit around and wait for some scientist in a white coat to give us permission to believe in these things and to practice what we can observe around us having an effect. And that is not saying that science is bad. That is saying science can't measure everything, at least not yet. For example, I think that psychic phenomena can probably be proven eventually. I think that there are definitely things that you can measure. I think it's a completely natural thing, but I don't think science has the means to measure it yet. And the same with various forms of spiritual experiences. I think that they definitely exist, but I don't think that using the methods and technologies available to science at this moment is the best way to measure them. It is like, it's a good example that with the doctor and his microorganisms, because in his time they didn't have microscopes, they didn't have the ability to see these microorganisms, so this was all a theory. But you could see their effect on the world, even if the scientific methods couldn't discover them yet. And people who believe in the supernatural and other spiritual topics say that I've had experiences, I can see these things affect on the world, and I choose to believe that. That does not mean that one say science is without value. It's like I can't use a car to stir in my tea cup. It's a very unsuited tool to get honey well distributed in my tea. But that isn't to say that cars are bad. Now, the other side of the debate do this as well. I have heard quite a few New Agers, pagans, and so on go on rants on how horrible science is and how horrible the doctors who practice traditional medicine, as in, what is it in English? Basically, your standard doctors, how horrible they are, and so on and so forth. And I think one needs a balance, because there was a time when religion, science, and magic were one thing. And I think in many ways it is still one thing. It is just different ways to look at the world around us and different ways to approach knowledge gathering. And I think that if we ignore one of them, then we are poorer for it. So, yeah. Now, like I said, this intolerance and this assumption that if you and this assumption that you have to have either or is definitely there in the spiritual communities as well, but I see more of it coming from the atheist and skeptic camp. Now, of course, that can be because I'm biased, because I am in the spiritual camp, so that I feel that their prejudices towards me, I feel more, I feel more than my side's prejudices towards them. And so, by all means, I'm biased there, but from my experiences, you have this typical, but if there are psychic phenomena, how come it hasn't been proven in a lab? And I say, I don't know. There are many theories why these phenomena is difficult to pin down in a lab. First of all, there have been experiments that has given results in labs, but they are usually not well published and are very often ignored. Again, what I say, with a scientific community which is very slow to alter their views on things. And this can be seen in, for example, things in the natural sciences as well. When someone has been, when someone suggests something other than the assumed truth, they are often met with extreme skepticism. But anyway, there are many theories. For example, one of the most common is that these things are an art. Like, one of my strongest psychic experiences was when me and my hubby, we were out walking, and I usually can't hit anything when I toss a stone at it or whatever. Aiming is not my thing. But we were in this nature area, and there was this stick in the ground, and we decided to toss stones at it. No apparent reason, we were bored and it didn't do any harm, so I picked some stones up from the ground, and I could feel myself and that stick and the stone as if we were one being, and I knew it would hit, and it was again and again and again, spot on. It hit. It was extremely strange, and it's very similar to what some people practicing Zen describes. It was very interesting. And so we did this a while, and then we went home, and I had this very, very strange feeling. So I decided to do some practice when it came to the occult. So I asked my hubby to roll dice, and I would, before he rolled, try to say what number it would land on. And I knew I were correct. And every time I were correct. Every single time, and we did this for hours. And this is my strongest psychic experience, and the problem is I can't get into that state on command. I definitely wish I could, but it is like when I make a piece of jewelry, some art, or write a story. I have to get the idea, and I can't always get that on command. It comes when it wants to. And therefore it's very difficult for me to go into a laboratory on Monday and decide, okay, I'm gonna do this. Because that experience might not come there. Because it doesn't work like that. Like, for example, I'm pretty good at cooking brownie cookies. So, assuming that I do watch the time and follow the recipe, I can be pretty sure that every time I decide to cook these cookies, they will turn out reasonably well, and with a similar result as last time. But psychic phenomena isn't like that, because even if I have this ability and I know methods to use it and bring it forth, it is an art. I can never know how much I will be able to bring out at any given time. And that, of course, it creates a problem with the idea that the experiments have to be, you have to be able to repeat the experiment and get the exact same result again and again and again, because usually you won't be able to, because it's an art. It's not something that you can always control. Another idea, which I definitely believe in, is that very often these scientists will be very skeptical, and this all operates on energy, meaning that their skeptical and negative energies affects what the psychic person is trying to achieve, and therefore reduces their results. And all this tells me that the current way that science tries to prove or disprove these phenomena is not very well suited. They don't use very good tools for the task. Now, of course, you are completely free to believe that that is because there's nothing to prove. However, I think that when you have so many millions of people who have had spiritual experiences, to just ignore it because science at the moment can't prove it, that doesn't make much sense to me. Like, if, let's say you had a trial and you had millions of people testifying, even if, yes, of course, sometimes testimonies are wrong, definitely. But when millions of people have the same testimony, that's a bit different. So, yeah. And often we don't even know why science get the results they get. Let's take homeopathy. Yeah. I did some tests on that. And before you ask for sourcing, I can try to dig it up, but right now I can't remember what that study was called. I just remember reading it some while ago. So if you want to so ignore what I'm saying now, because I don't have that source in front of me, by all means, but I'm gonna include it in the video anyway. So yeah, they had tested its effectiveness, and they showed that at first they did a double-blind test. Basically, the one giving out the medicine didn't know which was the placebo and which were the actual medicine. And then, and neither did the patients, they didn't know. And then they didn't have very much result. They had about what they would expect from the placebo. But then they did a blind test that the practitioner knew which medicine had the placebo and which medicine hadn't, but the patients didn't know. And then it had a huge effect on the patients. And many said, but that's proof that homeopathy doesn't work. How is that proof that homeopathy doesn't work? It's proof that the practitioner has a more important part than just, here you go, handing it out, here, handing it out, handing it out. It is proof that there's something there, some component that science doesn't yet understand. And this is my opinion, this is my point, because I see that my video is dragging on here. I think that science is incredibly important. Science is a great thing and we should definitely support science. But I also think that the technology that science has to work with and the knowledge base that science has to work with isn't yet perfected, and that there are some things that science and the scientific method as it is practiced today is ill-equipped to investigate. And that a lot of the research into the paranormal, into various forms of healing and so on, is done in ways which set these methods up to fail, because they bases themselves around methods that doesn't work for these arts. Just like you would if you decided to stir your teacup with a car, it doesn't work very well until science develops a spoon to stir with. I think we will see the same results again and again and again and again. And that doesn't mean that these things doesn't exist. It means that the methods used to research them isn't tools well suited for the task. However, that doesn't mean I am against science. And I don't think that people should be against science, because science is great. But science isn't perfect, nothing is perfect. And I don't think we should have a either or. I think one should embrace both. So yeah, thank you for watching my video, have a great day, and blessed be.